Welcome to the House of Tears. I am your abhorrent host, and I have a truly wretched tale to share with you today. Today, I shall tell you the story of a poor girl who lived forgotten and in death was remembered as a monster. But I warn you to beware of this tragic tale. I fear it may be enough to cause the faintest of hearts to stop. So, are you ready to hear the tale of the girl in the well? Her story starts, as many do. Once, long ago, there was a child born with the sweetest cries and nothing but good intentions. Unfortunate, then, that her mother never lived to hear her first cries, and her father found that they spared naught but bitterness for his lost love. This poor girl would have been alone in the world if not for her mother's brother. It should be cliché, then, that her uncle was a bad man to his core, but alas, truth is truth. Where one man abandoned the girl, the other held her prisoner upon a pedestal, a mere replacement for his own lost child. See, the girl's uncle had once been a father himself, but human life is tragic at the best of times. His child, his own girl that he neither knew nor cared for while she lived, died, due to his own neglect no less. While his wife was away to care for her ill mother, he remained with one sole duty, to keep his girl alive. He failed, obviously, but the method through which he failed was quite awful. You see, the girl had a habit of sleepwalking, and as his wife constantly reminded him, the doors of their home must be locked tight, deadbolts in place, lest their daughter stumble towards the lake their home rested upon. Except, you see, the man had never taken on this nightly routine. That was his wife's job, so when it was his turn to take on the duty in her absence, he merely forgot. And in the morning he woke to his child's bed cold, and his neighbors sobbing at the little body that had washed up on shore. His wife was driven to madness at the loss of her dear, sweet girl. So, when his own sister left behind naught but a child, and a husband who couldn't bear to look at it, of course he took the opportunity. A replacement for his own dead daughter provided from the flesh of his sister. Some was sweet, but a woman stuck in eternal grief, and a man who couldn't bear the cross of a singular, simple duty made for poor parents to a child such as this. You see, the child born to his sister was no mere child. But he would not have known. No. When his sister spoke of visions and psychic powers, he dismissed them as the ravings of a hysterical woman. Why would he have expected anything more from his new daughter? But shall we return to her mind, her perspective on this cursed home? They still lived upon the very same lake their first girl drowned, and now the replacement would wake to find herself staring out at it with dark water lapping at her toes. The new daughter would be woken by the incoherent sobbing of a mother caught in eternal mourning as her mad mother clung to the girl's nightdress and begged her not to sink into the abyss. This, I'm sure you know, is not conducive to a young psychic's development. No, the girl instead developed such an intense disconnect from the reality around her, a fascination with dark water, and a particular distaste for the way her uncle father looked at her. She reveled in the moments of kindness her new mother gave her, but such kindness never lasted long. Her mind reached out to her mother's. She tried to apply a psychic balm to a very real wound that kept growing larger and larger as the girl grew up, looking less and less like the child her mother lost by the day. One ordinary day, it was too much. Her mother needed help that a replacement child could not provide, and the man had no use for a child when he could not care for his own flesh and blood. Her mother was locked up among others with conditions such as hers, and the girl was sentenced to an orphanage in the mountains. No dark water to be seen, except for that in a dilapidated well. Now surely you know, one day this girl will end up at the bottom of that well. I assure you that this is true, but the path down is far darker than anyone would like to admit. You see, the orphanage was sponsored by a local church. The girl, now barely into adolescence, spent her days like other abandoned children. The mornings for prayer, the days in service, and in the evenings she would stare up from under a thin blanket on a threadbare cot and listen to the cries of the children who came before her, just as she once listened to the choking last breaths of her long-dead cousin. She was obedient and off-putting before anything else. Perhaps, like she had her mother, she could gain the love of the adults around her by playing the part they asked. Her peers found such behavior pathetic, but part of their underdeveloped minds still recognized the gaze of a predator among sheep. Psychics like her always feel different from a normal person like you, or even someone like me. Self-preservation recognizes what the logical mind refuses to see. Did you expect a tale of abuse labeled as religious righteousness, or perhaps bullying at the hands of her peers? Do you believe that is what led her down the well? I'm sorry to disappoint, but while the other children could recognize danger, adults are far more foolish. She had always wanted a father, and while the father was not like the man who took her in or the one from whose loins she was birthed, he smiled at her and patted her on the head when she did a good job acting in the role he assigned her. She was obedient, remember? She was isolated from her peers, remember? She had no one to protect her. If her uncle was bad, the father was evil. Truth is truth, and the truth is this. She was a girl who needed protection. Psychic abilities be damned. There was no defense for a child against a father with ill intentions. And she had nowhere to turn when his smiles turned vile and his pats turned into forceful touches. The other children looked at her with sad eyes, but turned away nonetheless. The adults would not look at her at all. In the end, the girl was set to become a mother before she had become a woman. She would become neither. She cried to an uncaring God for salvation from the misery growing within her, the misery that would tie her forever to an evil man. However, evil was all that listened. The father could not allow his crimes to be discovered, as they undoubtedly would be if things were left as they were. Before the eyes of God, the father laid hands on her, and he was plagued by the only defense she had, her visions, her psychic projections. Yet that did nothing but spur his evil on. When her sweet cries fell silent, he wrapped her in cloth, and she was delivered to dark water, dropped down the well, where no one would find her. Do you know what happens when a psychic dies so violently? Do you think she merely passed on, grateful for the end of her pain? No. There are some rages that can never be quelled. Her life was forgotten, her body swept away like stray dust, and her existence was never considered more than a bump in the father's otherwise smooth road. Her rage was greater than the cold grasp of death. The dark water filled her lungs as her damaged body sank into the well, and with it she became something far more dangerous. One of the boys in the orphanage carried with him a beloved item, a quaint little videotape recorder. It was one of his most enjoyed hobbies to traipse around the mountain recording his adventures. On one of these lovely little excursions, the boy stumbled upon an old well covered in rotting boards. Little boys are nothing if not curious, are they not? So what could the boy be expected to do but do his best to lift the boards off the well and peer in with his darling camera? Of course, the human eye saw nothing through the small opening that he managed to make, but she saw him. She saw her moment. The boy was adopted shortly after. Bright, energetic young kids would always be favored over dour predators like she was. When he was adopted, he wanted nothing more than to show the tapes of his adventures to his new family. Alas, one tape was no longer meant to dictate his adventures. No, this tape was hers. Her message, so that no one could ever forget her rage. It was her gateway that allowed her to exact revenge. A raging spirit awoke, driven to exact the same vicious beating that she underwent in her last hours, to fill the victim's lungs with the dark water she had been submerged in while barely breathing. The message could not be escaped. A memory now made into a monster. The girl in the well. The girl in the well. The girl in the well. I wonder what emotion took root in your heart. Did you pity this poor girl? Were you horrified? Are you sure that you are not complicit in the same crimes? Or do you claim to be the brave soul who would have protected this child? Perhaps you have been this child. Alas, I do not know your truths. Truth is truth, but only time may tell whether you are monster or man. Return again, this is my command. Witness what is held in the house of tears.